to the Future Series. I'm your host, Anthony Dan. And for those of you that are new to the podcast, we talk with real founders about building a business for the future. So whether you're scaling your first business or you're starting your first side hustle, we aim to give you the nuggets of information to help you succeed in the future of work. Today, we've got Gerard Holland on the podcast from Talent Match Africa. How's it going, Gerard?
Good, Anthony. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you very much for coming. For those of you that haven't heard Talent Match Africa, Gerard, would you be able to give us like a quick overview of yourself and Talent Match and what you do?
Yeah, so my name's Gerard, obviously. I'm an Australian, Melbourneian. Spent a couple of years in London, which we might touch on. Started off in finance and accounting, working at a firm called Pitcher Partners for nearly 10 years with a trip to the UK in the middle of that. And then when I started a business in 2016, so I bit the board and left the corporate world and started my first business in 2016-17 and then have ended up with a business out of Africa. So didn't plan to be in Africa. I love it. And it's become a real passion for mine, and I can see the opportunities there and the difference we can make. But like all businesses, you don't necessarily end up doing what you start off doing. So but yeah, maybe through the chat we can talk a bit more about where we've come from, where we've got to. Dan, I can talk about the current, Anthony, we can talk about the current business. And people shouldn't, by the way, people shouldn't have names that are two first names as a first and second name. It should be,
I've actually got 4.
Like unwritten rule, particularly in emails, when people reverse the surname to the first name. That's it. We can do a different podcast on that, Anthony. But yeah, we can dig in a bit deeper into whichever parts of that you want to go.
Yeah, it would be great to have a look back into your sort of early career and where this sort of entrepreneurial journey came from. I noted like you mentioned you were sort of in Australia, went to the UK for a bit. So you started some of your financial career at RBS in 2008, which would have been quite an interesting time, I'm sure. How was that?
Yeah, so I got my chartered accountancy, and then like a lot of Australians, in a couple of months of getting CA, jump on a plane to the UK, and got a job in banking, so working at RBS, and then a week after I started, the Lehman Brothers collapsed, and the world went to chaos. So all of a sudden, all these finance people in London, earning these great hourly and daily, well, everyone was on daily rates back then, but all these Aussies on these awesome daily rates, everyone's losing their jobs and budgets are being cut, and all of a sudden all these people don't have work, and it's a bit of a scary time. But I was lucky. I was working in a part of RB. I was in treasury, and so we were calculating the risk-weighted assets of RBS and ABN AMRO, which was an acquisition they had done a few years earlier, and for the UK government to bail them out, which happened twice. So Fred the Shred was at the CEO of the bank at the time, but yeah, the UK government came in with millions and millions of pounds to bail them out, or else they would have collapsed. So there was a saying around that time, too big to fail, and Lehman Brothers was the one that was decided wasn't too big to fail. So that went, and then everything cascaded after that. But it was a really interesting time working in an investment bank when things are pretty bad, and the bank is on its knees, and working treasury was super interesting. My takeaway after being there for a couple of years that I didn't want to work in investment banking. So there's a lot of glory, I think, in being an investment banker, and you're like, wow, that must be amazing. But you get in there and you're sort of in the weeds of it all. And it just wasn't a place that I wanted to spend my career. So I came back. I also became a diehard Liverpool supporter while I was there. So that's a lifelong passion that exists with me until today. And so coming back, I'm an Essendon supporter in Australia. So Liverpool is more fun to support than Essendon. And I went back into finance and then spent 4 years as the national operations manager at Pitcher Partners, and I helped build the outsourced CFO division. And part of that was I became an outsourced CFO. And then I did my master's of entrepreneurship and innovation. So I encourage anyone now, if you're going to do a master's, to go and work for 5-6 years and then go and do a master's. I don't really get the logic of doing a master's straight after a bachelor. Bring real world experience into education. But the Masters of Entrepreneurship and Innovation was what sort of encouraged me to go and start a business. So I was doing it through the firm I was at. Accountants are notoriously not entrepreneurial. And it was during that I had a penny drop moment of a guy called Bob Beaumont, who's this big Texan guy that had made a lot of money in oil. And saying, when you're 85 and you're on your deathbed, what do you want to think about your life, about what you've done? And for me, it wasn't, being a partner at an accounting firm or a consulting firm. I wanted to go off and do something. I wanted to build something myself. I didn't know what. I didn't know how. Thought I probably knew everything, and then you work out you know nothing. But that was a penny drop moment that I knew I needed to leave and go and start a business. So from that day on, I started on the hunt to come up with ideas, and it's a mindset thing to come up with ideas. It is actually a flexing thing in your brain to be able to think entrepreneurially and see something happening and think, well, I could start a business around that. You could do that better. Or I had to flex that muscle a lot. I didn't have it. And then eventually being an outsourced CFO for a client in international education, I saw an opportunity in that space to help international students with employment and outcomes from their degrees. And it was on the back of that idea that I quit my job and went and started a business, which is called Intern Match. We built a tech platform to facilitate internships because the universities were doing a terrible job with it. And then the universities ended up becoming our clients. And that was my first venture into being an entrepreneur. And I thought I knew a lot, and then once I got into it, I realized I knew absolutely nothing.
Yeah, it's quite often people get these sort of either like a little twitch or something that's pulling them to go out and do their own thing, or just a light bulb moment where someone says something that you think that makes you stop and think and look back and think, what, am I doing the right thing? Should I be doing something else? And then, like you said, that little switch in your brain, that entrepreneurial kind of like blinkers that come off, and start opening yourself up to different opportunities around.
Yeah, and I think for people that might be listening that are going through a similar journey, that maybe they do have a corporate job but they want to go and do something themselves. My trick was that I teamed up with a lawyer, a guy called Adam Buffalo, who was working at Russell Kennedy, and he was doing the masters as well. And so we just committed to have lunch every 2 weeks, and we had to bring 3 ideas to lunch every week. And for the first 4 or 5 fortnights, it'd be the day before, and I'm like looking around trying to come up with ideas. I didn't have any, but it was by forcing myself to be accountable to Adam. And we actually came up with the idea for my business at one of those lunches. And so by talking about it, finding someone who's of the same mindset, and forcing yourself to practice that, thinking like entrepreneurially, was what actually came up with the idea. So you need to surround yourself by people that are also a bit entrepreneurial, because not many people actually are.
Yeah, well, like you said as well, in the accounting world, there might not be as many.
Yeah, just report.
Amazing. And when you decided to take this plunge there, was it a full plunge, or were you trying to build stuff on the side, like a bit of a side hustle to start with?
Yeah, so I became a part-time CFO. So left my corporate job, went in to be a part-time CFO for the company that I was an outsourced CFO for. Did that for 2.5 days a week. That paid me a salary, and then I could build the business at the same time. So yeah, it wasn't complete, pull the Band-Aid off and see how long you can go without money. But I went into a bit of credit card debt, took a big a hit to my salary, but I still had an income, and then could build a business. And I didn't pay myself out of my business until 26 months. That's how long it took before I was comfortable enough to actually pay myself from the earnings of the business.
People do it in different ways. Personally, I'd prefer to have something like a salary coming in, so we know the basics are covered whilst you're getting and testing and making sure something's going to work. But I guess it depends where you are in your life. That's super interesting in terms of 26 months. What was your mindset at the beginning then with building this on the side, and what were those first two and a bit years like?
Well, the first year we didn't make a sale. So, you go on, we were building a technology platform. We ended up pivoting the business after 9 months. We got, the original model was wrong. And this also, most entrepreneurial founders you speak to would say that they've had some sort of pivot or multiple along their journey. You never get it right the first time. So the first year was a bit tough. We went and raised a little bit, and we don't have any clients yet. So that was a bit tough. But then once we pivoted the business and, we started earning revenue on the back of that. And I also just wanted to protect our capital. So, 26 months is probably longer than what I needed to, but I wanted to make sure we had as long a runway as possible whilst we built up revenue in the business. It doesn't go from just A to Z in one go. Things build up over time, and it's a roller coaster. So that just allowed us to prolong. My business partner, started getting paid before me, so he sort of went in full time first, and I probably followed 6-7 months later. But for us, it was just a bit of capital protection as well.
And was this just across Australia Intern Match, and it was helping students find work and working with universities directly?
Yeah, so working with unis directly who would pay us to put people into an internship and use our platform to do that. We started in Australia, Melbourne, Sydney, went all over Australia. We've covered every state, including the Northern Territory. And then we went into the UK and into Canada. So we sort of took it internationally. And yeah, that was going into the end of 2019. And then in January 2020 was when I met Zondwa Mandela, who's the grandson of Nelson and Winnie Mandela, that opened up my horizon to Africa, and Talent Match Africa was built and born off the back of that.
Fascinating. How did that come about? How did that conversation come about then?
Yeah, so I was introduced to Zondwa. He's the youngest grandson of Nelson and Winnie, and I remember he looked me in the eye and he said, "Why are you helping privileged people?" And he was, why are you helping international students in developed countries? And my response to him was, a bit defensive, that, well, not all international students are privileged. Most of them are not. They're coming from, rural places in Nepal that, a whole lot of people saved up money to send someone overseas for a better education, a better life. But he said, no, that's not what I mean. I mean, what I mean is you need to be in Africa. We need your model in Africa and getting young people into jobs. Africa has a population, going to be at 2 billion people by 2050. And you've got an average age of 19. Every second person entering the workforce by 2030 will live on the African continent. So a huge movement of young people that need to be in work, and the African economies can't necessarily absorb all of it. And so he was saying we need a model like yours here. And so the pandemic happened a few weeks after that conversation, and that caused me to really reflect and think, okay, well, what else? What does our business mean? And at that stage, international students stopped flowing into Australia and the UK. So my business model was not looking so good. If there's no international students, we relied on that. So it made me think, okay, well, maybe we need to diversify. So I started looking at Africa, and we started running some pilots in South Africa, being locked up during COVID. And then as soon as we could, I jumped on a plane and flew straight into Ethiopia, and then into Rwanda, to Kenya, and then South Africa. And that trip just, completely opened up my horizons and my perspectives for the opportunities in Africa, the people, the level of education, the quality of the English, smart, tech savvy, great infrastructure, high-speed internet, like all the tools you need to be a part of the global workforce, but just largely overlooked. So I could see that as the biggest opportunity of my life. And on the back of that, we launched Talent Match Africa, and now we have people working permanently from our offices in Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Town, Nairobi, and Addis, and working for companies in the USA, UK, Australia, China, France. So we're able to tap into our host company network, and then now bring a new product, being people based in Africa, but not for an internship, but for full-time employment. And so I say now that, we compete against the Philippines every day. Everyone's gone to India for the last 40 years and the Philippines for the last 25, and Africa is the next frontier. So we're pretty early when it comes to Africa, late when it comes to global resourcing. But, there's not too many people looking at Africa, and it's slowly getting more and more attention. Time zone wise, work really well for the UK, Europe, the USA markets, through the night for Australia. But the level of English and the personalities, and, there's a lot of Aussies build these really nice connections, particularly South Africans, a lot of similarities. So it ticks a lot of boxes.
That sounds amazing. And is Intern Match still going as well?
Yeah, and that business still runs as well. And then so we have 2 businesses now, all under the same umbrella: Intern Match and Talent Match Africa.
Amazing. And I assume your sort of takeoff period with Talent Match Africa is maybe a bit smoother than Intern Match. Did you get traction a bit quicker?
Yeah, I think we had sales pretty early for Talent Match Africa. So, more of a seasoned entrepreneur now. And you can end up being more client centric, right? So go where your clients are. So we could see we could monetize Talent Match Africa and bring clients in very quickly. Whereas when we started the Intern Match business, we could build something and we think we can get clients. So a bit of a different approach.
Excellent. And what's the sort of future for Talent Match Africa then? I know you said you're quite early in Africa. What do you see as the next sort of 5 years?
Yeah, so I think we could be one of the big players in Africa for global resourcing. The type of roles that we do are generally, higher end jobs with marketing managers and finance controllers, people driving business development roles, sales support, finance and accounting is pretty big. And then you've got the movement towards AI and what that means. So there's virtually not a job on the planet that's not going to be impacted by AI. But now I've got a lot of businesses. I just came off a meeting this afternoon of one of our clients in Brisbane that has some people of ours in South Africa, and the CEO said some of the work they've done is the best they've ever seen. Now, the work was supported by a smart human being using Claude or using AI to superpower their work. And I think that's now probably the next frontier of work where, I mean, we've all seen SaaS companies get absolutely annihilated their share prices because, and we've probably all done, I mean, I've done it. You can build something using Claude that is tailored exactly for what you need as opposed to subscribing to a SaaS product. So now you have a model where you can have smart people know how to use tools like Claude. Based in South Africa, the wages are 70% less than what you'd pay in Australia, and they can perform at 3 times what we could 9 months ago. So business owners can get massive leverage of having, lower cost resources due to cost of living in those markets, completely upskilled using tools like Claude, and that businesses can just accelerate. That's a hugely growing trend for us at the minute.
Yeah. Are you helping actually upskill the employees in Africa with Claude or different AI tools so they can actually use them for clients?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's moving fast, right? So, I mean, the flavor of the month 8 months ago was OpenAI, and now Claude's completely taken over, and Gemini threw themselves in there for a bit, and it's going to ebb and flow, and the tools change so quickly. I think every second day I'm updating a new version of Claude. So, but we've got people on the ground that are, coaches and mentors, and that are, making sure we're staying on top of what's happening. But the main skill set people need is curiosity and a determination, and want to get into things and learn things and have business acumen and maybe understand how technology and software works so they know what they're building actually makes sense. So, making sure we've got people that are upskilled in those type of environments is really important because, like you've probably learned as well, and I have, you'd go and spend 5-6 hours in Claude and, you're having a lot of fun with it and building things, but you can learn so easily just by chatting to it and seeing what's working and what's not. So there's an element of us upskilling our people, but then there's an element of us making sure that our people know where to go to upskill themselves and giving them encouragement and time to be making sure that they're upskilling.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You just got to get stuck in and use it and understand it. I think it'd be interesting to get your point of view on this as well, being in this sort of staffing arena at the moment, having been through the waves of the financial crisis, then COVID as well as a business owner. How do you think this AI wave is going to play out, and how much effect do you think it's going to have on the way we're working?
Yeah, so it's fun. It's fun having debates with people about this, particularly a few beers or a few wines or something. Yeah, and then look, one analogy is that we've been through a lot of revolutions and industrial revolutions, and more jobs have always been created, which is true. While this be any different? I think this technology is fundamentally different to anything we've ever seen before. I think Claude is one of the greatest technologies that's ever been produced. I mean, just go and spend a weekend building things in Claude, and how could you not say that? So there is going to be a lot of disruption. Look, new jobs are going to get created, but jobs are definitely going to disappear. So there are some jobs that just fundamentally will go. Like why would you? And I'm already seeing this with our clients too, that roles that they would have hired for 4 months ago, now hearing, we don't need that anymore. We don't need that anymore. AI is doing that for us. We need someone to do this. We've got another client in the US at the minute that wants people. They've gone and built a whole lot of agents themselves, but now they've got to manage their own agents. So they're talking to the CEO, and he's like, I've got these agents I need to manage, but now it's causing me a headache. So can you just give me someone that can just look after our agents, because they're not set and forget. You've got to monitor these things, see what's working, modify, it becomes, you've got 10, 12, 13, 14, 15 agents running, it becomes a bit of a cluster, like trying to work out what's all going on with it. So that's a new job that didn't exist, 5-6 months ago. So some jobs will disappear. There's going to be new jobs created. I personally think more jobs will disappear than is created. I think there is going to be a real disruption to employment. You just look at how fast it's moving at the minute. Imagine where it's up to in a year's time. So, I think 80% of customer service, just straight out customer service, can probably be done by AI. Some people passionately disagree with that because you don't want to talk to a computer, but as people get more and more used to it and they see how effective it is, like, why would you not? So yeah, I think there's going to be big changes coming our way. I think it's exciting. It is scary at the same time, but there's a lot of opportunity that comes off the back of it. But it's fundamentally going to change the way we all work. And I think if people have their head in the sand about that, it's a bit dangerous.
Looking at that from an opportunity point of view, with a founders and entrepreneurial lens, obviously the barrier to entry for starting a business now is starting to come down like that. And it'd be interesting to get your take on it and what advice you might give to people who might be in a company now working but wanting to do something entrepreneurial, seeing the barrier to entry coming down a bit now, or someone who's looking at taking the plunge.
Yeah, what a time to start a business. So I was at a dinner a couple of weeks ago. One of the guys there is a Kiwi, and he's got an agency that built a lot of tech. The business has been around for a long time, and his description of software development now is code is free, like literally it's free. So he's really revisiting his business. Like, well, what do I sell now? Like, people used to pay me for a time of a software engineer at a really good rate. That now I can go and get that code that engineer would do for free. And if you go and play with Claude Code, or you go and play with Cursor, one of these tools, you realize it actually is true. You could build an entire platform for free, just time, and tokens. It might cost you $100 a day in tokens to go and build an enterprise grade platform using the latest enterprise technologies. So if you look at that and you think, okay, if you've got an idea and it involves any form of tech or software, which most things do these days, you can now go and build it without having to hire a dev team. Now, for me, that's super exciting because I'm more of the business side of things. I'm not a software developer. If I wanted to go and build a business tomorrow, I could go and do that without having to hire engineers. That completely changes the barrier to go and build a business. Previously, you'd have to go and raise some money. You'd have to go and build the deck. You'd have to go and work out what CTO you want to bring on and what the map out what you actually want to go and build sprints, get a build, realize it's wrong, go and change it. Like, takes a long time and a lot of money. And I've built tech myself and it's taken a long time and a lot of money. You can now go and do that in a few weeks, just yourself. And anyone can go and do it, or build it on weekends now. So we're going to see so many businesses get established now by just solo founders that in their own time are just building. They've had an idea sitting there for years, just never had the money or the time to go and do it. That they can go and in their spare time, have a crack at it, build it. The marketing, you can use AI for your marketing. Like Meta's doing an enormous amount with AI now for how you do marketing. You can go and create avatars to be maybe your videos if you don't want to spend money on real humans. Every element of starting a business can now be done with AI, which either makes it probably both, way faster and way cheaper. So for anyone that's actually thinking, I've got this idea I've always wanted to do, man, there's never been a time in the world ever that's better to actually have a crack at it now, costing you nothing other than your time and having fun with it.
Yeah. Where do you see, I don't know if you still have these conversations with your lawyer friend and bringing 3 ideas to the table, but where would you see the gaps in the market right now that are going to be a good place to start a business in 2026?
I think it's so if you go into any business right now and you just go and look at their processes, every single business has opportunities to go and create a process that is using AI. And I think that's where maybe we'll end up having like thousands, maybe millions of businesses start that are just doing little things it's a game-changing thing that they can go and implement. So I think, yeah, you're able to go and build custom specific solutions. Now, whether that means you have this big SaaS business that has this big unicorn thing, I don't think it's maybe going that direction, but there's just so many opportunities that you can go and build something that's actually adding value, and it's adding value at the customer level to where you're paying for it. So the time from having an idea, I see a problem, and like we all know, like you need a solution that solves a problem, and you need to be able to monetize the solution. There's like 3 just basic categories of starting a business. So you see a problem, it's a massive pain point. You can now go and probably build it really quickly for not a lot of money, and you can get straight to the customer to pay for it really quickly. But maybe people go and start building businesses where they're making 50 grand a month on something like that, and that's just a great income, and which is not a bad thing, right? And there's lots and lots of these things that are built, as opposed to going and building an Atlassian, building a whatever that, some of the other software, HubSpot or whatever. I think, mate, there's going to be a lot of that emerging, and maybe the mindset changes too, right? So if you can go and build something, there's enough customers out there for exactly what you've got, and you can earn 50 to 100 grand a month just by having that. And that's what going to be your income for the next 10 years in doing that. Well, I know, I'm happy to make $1 million a year just by running this thing and not too much time into it. It solves a really niche problem. We might see a lot of that emerging.
Yeah, a bit of a democratizing of wealth with people who do take advantage of it and jump on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, really interesting, really interesting. Well, like as we're just about to wrap up and sort of finish off the episode, if people are interested in getting in touch, whether they were looking at Intermatch or were interested in hearing more about Talent Match for their company, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, on LinkedIn is probably the easiest. So yeah, drop me a message on LinkedIn. Say you heard about it on this chat with Anthony, and yeah, we can either jump on a call, grab a coffee, or whatever it might be. Or if you've got any questions about wanting to start a business as well, and just need a bit of encouragement to go and do it, and also any businesses out there that are looking for talent offshore instead of going to the traditional markets. And I encourage everyone to look at Africa. Then would love to have a conversation with you, or if you need interns locally.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. My takeaways would be the art of the pivot. You're not going to always get it right the first time. Then I'm going to go and find a mate and book a lunch in and come up with 3 ideas.
I mean, the worst case scenario is you get to have lunch with a mate every 2 weeks. So,
Perfect. Well, thanks so much, Gerard. It's been great having you on and having a chat through.
All right, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. And thanks everyone for listening. See you next time.